4.12, interpret trig graphs in context. Over the course of a full year, the daylight in a certain city follows a periodic pattern. The graph below represents the average daylight in minutes over the course of 24 months, with time t representing the number of months after January 1st of a certain year. So basically this is our minutes of our daylight, average daylight, for each month for 24 months. And we're going to find each of the following about this graph. Now in Delta Math, you'll just have a graph and then one of the questions, but I thought this would make it a little simpler. Part A says, what is the midline and what does it represent? These will be drop-down boxes, so you won't have to come up with the words on your own. The midline, we know, is cutting the graph horizontally in half. How we would find it on this graph is we need to average the y values. So anytime I'm talking about a midline, since it's going through the y-axis, midline's always going to be the y values. So to find that, I'm going to average this maximum of 919 plus this minimum of 499, and then I'll divide it by 2. That's what an average is adding the numbers, dividing by the number of numbers. And you should get that that comes out to be 709. We need some kind of label. Well, if we're talking about the y values, we just look at the label on the y-axis. It's minutes. So this would be 709 minutes. That's not the what does it represent. The what does it represent is going to be kind of like a little statement or a sentence. Well, since this is the average daylight, that really is the average of these averages. So let's just say the year's average, average, and maybe I said temperature. Sorry, some of them had temperature. The year's average daylight. Oh, I don't think it did. So finding the midline is some kind of average because it's cutting in half. Let's see, 709 would be somewhere like this. Okay, part B, what is the amplitude and what does it represent? Amplitude we know is the distance from the midline to either a maximum or a minimum. So that's easy enough. We would just take 919, again the y values, 919 minus the midline, which we found to be 709. So what is that difference? And then that should get you 210. Again, we need a label. Well, we're doing a y value, so that would be the minutes again. What does it represent? It's the difference between the years, you could say either the maximum and the average or the minimum and the average. So I'll put a slash there. It's the difference between the year's max / min and the average daylight. Okay, so an amplitude is this average to the max, average to the min. It's the difference of something. Part C, what is the period and what does it represent? Okay, this is kind of hard because we don't know if there's been a horizontal shift on these, and we don't know if it's a sine or a cosine graph because there's no equation. So when you're finding the period of it, I want you to find the difference in the two maximums or two minimums. So you could either do from this max to this max or this min to this min, but you don't want to do a max minus a min. We want one full repetition. So we'll just kind of keep it like it's a cosine graph every time. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and do from the two maximums. We want to now use the x values. Remember the period was always comparing it with the x-axis, so now we're talking about months. So you might want to make a note for yourself that the period deals with the x values. And so we're going to subtract the x values. That would be the 17.5 minus 5.5. That's easy enough to do the math on. 17 minus 5 would be 12. And it's in months, which is a year. What does that represent? It's the time between consecutive daylight highs or lows. The time between consecutive daylight highs is what we did, or it could be lows if you did that. So remember, these are going to be drop down choices, but it's the difference between this high to this high, how much time passes in between before it gets that other high again. All right, and then the last two are easier. What is the maximum? What does it represent? The max, again, is the height. So it's looking at the y values. The max, the highest this ever goes is 919. The lowest it ever goes is 499, and that's going to be in minutes. So you got 919 minutes and 499 minutes. And what it means is pretty obvious. It's the year's daylight high so it's in which month did it get the highest, and then this would be the year's daylight low. And that's it.